Welcome to Episode 1, Series 2 of our podcast, Simply Holistic Living. I am thrilled to welcome Clare Grady back onto the podcast. Clare, just to remind you, is a naturopathic nutritional therapist. She's the owner of a new wellness, a holistic nutritional therapy practice based in Oranmore, County Galway. In this episode, we talk about our relationship with food and our connection with food sources. We also discuss the innate wisdom of our own bodies to guide us on what we need to do to live a healthier lifestyle. Clare has a really holistic approach to health and sees her clients as partners in the health journey they embark on with her. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey Clare, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here again. I'm back here with Clare Grady, who is a
naturopathic nutritional therapist. It is definitely a mouthful. Yeah.
Okay, Clare, it's great to have you here on the podcast again. And I know we spoke on the previous podcast and there was great feedback on that. And today, what we're going to have a look at is the wise traditions that our elders and past generations have had that is there in the community. And also our own stories, what we're bringing to the table. When I was coming here, I was thinking of the farmer that I met recently up the fields, and I was there with the wellies carrying my bottle of water, and I thought I was being so great, hydrating and whatever. And he turns around to me and says, "Jesus, Julie, it's a queer day when I see people drinking water out of a plastic bottle." You know? And that really got me thinking. We got talking then about, he said, I get my water from the well, and he talked about food sources and how he eats, and we had this great conversation about where we've come to today in his 90 years, the changes that he's seen. And that brought me to kind of say, I have to have Clare back on the podcast to talk about this. So I'll leave it open to you.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting because you can see that that's not even one full generation, and we've seen so many changes since then. I grew up on a farm in Roscommon. My grandparents and my parents were both from farming backgrounds. They grew their own vegetables. They reared their own meat. There was always freezer bags in the freezers, not always labelled. Sometimes you just have to take them out and, roll the dice, see what was in it when it defrosted. And we had our own well. And up until my grandfather passed away, we used to go to Roscommon and fill bottles from the well still. Because we live in Galway now, obviously. That kind of, I suppose, experience from really young age, that they're the kind of experiences that set up the foundation of your health, right? Because not only are they impacting you, I suppose, your education, your knowledge around food, your understanding where your food is sourced, okay, where it's the quality of the food that you're consuming as well. That's a very different situation than we're facing now, 40 years later, okay? So it's something where you look at what has changed, these conveniences, I suppose, in our life, like the bottles of water and the ready-to-go meals and the running around snacking and the, conveniences as well, like things like microwaves and, ovens and different things. You start to kind of lose the connection between the quality of the food that you're consuming and then just having something to eat, like just to fill the gap or to fill the void. And I suppose this idea, it's really coming from the Western Price Federation or in the US, and they look a lot at this idea of wise traditions, okay? So ancestral traditions, things that we would have done inherently innate to us, our grandparents at least, and probably ourselves to a certain extent, that we've just lost touch with, lost connection with. And it's not anything, funny or unusual or quirky. It's just really basic steps around food and the knowledge that we have around the food and lifestyle choices that we make. And some of those are really as simple as, where does your food come from? you know, the type of foods that we're now consuming, okay? You can see so many packages on packets of foods, and like clients will sit in front of me and they'll say, you know, I always make sure to check the ingredients. And like a really kind of snooty way of replying to that is, well, most real food won't have a packet with the list of ingredients. But that's just the way we live, right? Okay?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like the kind of idea is that you're looking at, how can I eat as nutrient dense, okay, so as many nutrients as possible, the quality of my food to be the highest, whether that's proteins, where your meat is coming from, but also the root vegetables, the vegetables that are grown below and above the ground. Like the quality of those has all our nutrients, it has all our antioxidants, has all our phytonutrients. It's what the building blocks for our bodies. Okay, those minerals, vitamins, macronutrients like fats, proteins, carbohydrates, and phytonutrients, these plant-based nutrients, they all talk to your DNA. They talk to how your body expresses itself, how its cells replicate. And that's really, really important. That's super important, right? That's going to dictate your health and well-being. So if your food quality, your water quality, and the way we're living, if that kind of triad of I suppose the most important basic foundations of your health and well-being, they're not really on point, they're not really good quality, then that's going to reflect in your physical well-being and also in your mental well-being to a certain extent, because you'll be lacking raw materials for various neurotransmitters and things like that. So the basics are like going back to this really traditional idea, like what is it that we can do that can build this really healthy foundation, and then just implement those regularly. So small, consistent changes daily that have maximum impact on your health and well-being. Okay?
Yeah, you reminded me of I had a family visiting, and a niece, she was little and she was looking at our garden with vegetables growing.
Yeah.
And she turned around to her mum and was like, "Oh, Mum, there's dirt on those potatoes,
dirt
you know?"
Yep.
And it's
like
comes
miles away from what you would be used to. I remember my nan used to send me out and she'd say I'd need, 2 or 3 scallions, 2 carrots, maybe a beetroot or whatever she was growing. And I'd go down that field. I wouldn't know what I'm looking for. I'm like 4 or 5. So I would pull something up and I'm like, well, that's not it. Push it back down, right? You just kind of got used to it. You knew that's where you got your food from. You may not have been expert on it. You didn't know what leaf referred to a carrot or a scallion or whatever. But you knew that you had to go and get it from the ground, from the soil. And that it would be dirty. You'd have to bring it back. You'd put it in a bucket. You'd wash it. You'd scrub it. And you clean it. Then it would be peeled. Then it would be chopped or mashed or whatever it would be. And it would make dinner. Like such a simple connection, but a lot of us have lost that connection. So thankfully, there's some amazing organic farmers around. And especially here in the West, we're really blessed with some really lovely farmers who are diligently really looking after the soil quality and maintaining the highest quality of nutrient density in the foods that they're producing for us. So that means that they're reducing or having no pesticide exposure, which is huge. Okay, so pesticide exposure, unless your food is organic, there will be exposure to pesticides. Pesticides become an issue because a lot of them present to the body as foreign. Your body doesn't really know how to deal with it, and it's hard to remove it from foods once it's sprayed on there or if it gets into the roots in the soil. It does become a component of the food that you're consuming. And so your body kind of recognizes it as foreign and has to do something with it. But unfortunately, a lot of petrochemicals that come from pesticides mimic estrogen, and we know that estrogen can be detrimental to our health, especially as women. And so if it mimics, or if it's also known as xenobiotic, it has an estrogen mimicking shape, it can bind to estrogen receptor sites in our body, and that can become problematic over time. And if we think about like estrogen driven cancers like breast, uterine, ovarian cancers, esophageal, bowel cancer, all of these are linked to higher levels or potentially linked to higher levels of estrogen. So if we're taking in foreign forms of estrogen from things like as simple as petrochemicals, so pesticides on our food, where our body is having to deal with that, break it down, detoxify it, and eliminate it to the best it possibly can.
So we're creating our own illnesses.
Well, it's just that we find this balance. Yeah. And if we can remove exposure, okay, so pesticides is just one thing, right? So if we can choose organic. Often clients say to me, or just people in general, when you talk about food, organic is kind of a myth. It's just a fad. It's just for selling. It's just because it's more expensive, they can make more money. I don't necessarily agree with that. I feel like we all grew up essentially on an organic diet, but that farming practices have changed. And so now that we are intensively farming, so for example, if you have a farm in Louth and Brussels sprouts are your business, this is your season from September to March. You're only producing Brussels sprouts. That's your exclusive crop because you're trying to maximize your profits, maximize your yield. I understand that. Economically, it makes perfect sense. But the reality is, because you've no mixture of other vegetables, because there's no mixture of other growing processes happening at the same time, so probably not even hedges, you're going to have to spray those crops in order to maintain a healthy yield so that you can make the most profit that you can this season. That doesn't reflect the nutritive value of it. I could sit here and tell you all day about the benefits of Brussels sprouts and how incredible they are. Their levels of isothiocyanates, glucosinolates, the amount of brassica vegetables like Brussels sprouts that have antioxidants and phytonutrients that are essential for detoxification, essential for hormone regulation, essential for providing the body with what it needs to do the jobs that it needs to do. Yet if it's sprayed, we have all of those benefits potentially, but we also have the negative or non-active that we really don't want to take in as well from these petrochemicals if they are sprayed. So it's counterintuitive, it's counteractive to the benefits that you're taking in. But again, you can only make these decisions with the knowledge that you have at the time. And it's not to freak anybody out, okay? Yeah. But it's to know if you can make that option to choose organic, not only are you supporting that farmer for their livelihood, but you're also improving the nutrient intake of the food that you consume.
Or if somebody can has a patch.
Or grow your own.
Grow their own.
Oh, wowee, that's amazing. That's twice as good.
Yeah. So you have a small patch. You can
window boxes.
Yeah. Small.
I used to do lots of window boxes with lots of herbs and spices in there. Yeah. And so the herbs and the spices in particular, like your oregano, rosemary, thyme, all of these ones that are really easy to grow have huge potential benefits. So they're all of those that I just mentioned. So oregano, rosemary and thyme, the ones that have the really strong volatile oils, all of those guys are highly antimicrobial, antibacterial. So you're cooking them with your roast vegetables, you're popping them in with your soups, you're putting them in with your stews, and you're killing off any unwanted bacteria in the gut as you consume them. So it's really beneficial for your immune system and your digestive health. So you've got something as simple as just growing those things and including them fresh from your window box or from your garden every day, or 2 or 3 times a week. That's potentially positively impacting your health and your immune system.
So we've got great taste, and we've also been our own physician.
Yeah. You're kind of in your control from seed to shelf, aren't you? From seed to your dishes that you're cooking. Yeah. You're in control of that. It's in your environment. You're making sure that you're maximising the quality of it.
Yeah. Because I know even last night we were looking what we had left in the garden. It was like, we still have some potatoes. We still have some lovely carrots. You just kind of using up the last of the veg.
And there's no waste there. It's therapeutic, it's a lifestyle thing, it's encouraging you for functional movement, because with gardening there's a lot of bending, picking, turning, twisting, weeding. So all of those things add to that functional movement side of things. So not just exercise, but moving your body in different ways every day to keep flexible, to stay supple, so that you're moving. And that puts off injury as well, and it keeps your joints healthy and your spine healthy from twisting and turning and bending.
So instead of going to the gym, pop out to the garden.
Absolutely. And if it's flowers that you're into and the weeding and the gardening and all of that is your thing, then keep it up, but obviously don't overdo it. Like a lot of people in my family who end up complaining about back pain, the first sign of good weather in spring. I totally get it, right? You want to be out there. It takes a lot of work, but you do want to mind your back as well. So there is positive sides of it, but you just need to make sure you're not overdoing it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's how we've moved from that. I suppose for anybody listening to this is saying this is great, but I'm a busy mom or a busy dad, or I'm working, and I haven't got the time. It's easier to pick up the freezer and the frozen dinner, and I've done it myself.
Absolutely.
So how, without putting huge pressure, so how do we get from there to what we're talking about? That transition.
Absolutely. So I'm a busy mom with 2 kids under 3, and I don't have anything growing currently. I can barely keep my houseplants alive. I'm trying to keep 2 small children alive.
Fair
so
enough.
I can completely understand that. However, when I'm in my supermarket, I am consciously looking for the organic options that are available. Okay? So Lidl and Aldi, Tesco, Dunnes, they will all have an organic range. So it could be just broccoli that you pick up every week, or the leeks, or it could be the tomatoes, or the cucumbers, or the lettuce leaves. But consciously you're making that choice to choose organic where you can. Okay? Easy as that. When it comes to meats, if you're buying in a supermarket, obviously try and buy Irish meat, which most of them will sell, or a step further would be go to your butcher. They will know where their meat is sourced, and you'll be able to request from them, oh, I prefer turkey mince, or I'd like turkey steaks, or I prefer to have beef. What kind of beef? Is it steak mince? Is it beef mince? You know, those things give you a little bit more control over the quality of the food that you're consuming. And again, you can get an organic chicken, for example, if you wanted to do that. Or you can choose grass-fed, pasture-raised meat, okay? Gets a little bit more pricey, but again, you're prioritizing the quality of the protein. But for me, I'm always looking around for the organic vegetables. And that's where I feel we get most of our nutrient intake. So that's where I want to prioritize my spend when it comes to the additionals for organic. And same with grains, like if you can get organic oats, or if you can get organic quinoa, things like that, just means that you're reducing your exposure to that pesticide again and again and again.
So it's making those changes, just a little bit of research, small.
Yeah. And for women in particular, okay, our liver is the crux of everything, our hormonal conditions, our detoxification, our digestive issues. So if we want to prioritise and support our detoxification function, our elimination, we really need to prioritise our nutrient intake, especially from your dark green leafy vegetables like your broccolis, your cauliflowers, your kales, your Brussels sprouts, your leeks, and then from your sulfur-based compounds like your onions, your garlics, your shallots, your spring onions, things like that.
Yeah. So particularly then, I'm thinking of any woman that's listening to this who's going into menopause, or in that
perimenopause for 15 years. Yeah, absolutely. Prioritize your dark green leafy vegetables. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And try and choose organic herbs and spices when you're cooking.
Okay.
They're small, but they're pack a punch. Even the thing like one of the biggest things for helping with, I suppose, estrogen detoxification and elimination, unless we're going to the bathroom every day and we're eliminating every day, we can't remove these excess toxins. That's just the nature of the beast. So staying hydrated, okay, lubricating the bowel, plenty of good fats. So lots of your organic olive oil, or you could go one step further for women in particular for detoxification, for hormone health, is your flax oil. And you can buy those mainly in your health food store. Some supermarkets like John's might do them, Tesco might do them, or delicatessens will have them for you. But again, you want organic cold pressed flaxseed oil, and then the flax seed itself. Okay, so whether it's milled or whether it's whole, and flax over chia, just in this instance specifically because it's a phytonutrient, or it's a phytoestrogen. So it's a plant-based estrogen. So it's much, much milder than anything foreign, but it can block those receptor sites, so it doesn't allow any of that foreign estrogen to get in there. Okay. But it's also a really good fibre, and the lignans will bind onto your detoxified byproducts and draw it out of the body, so it encourages a really healthy, full bowel movement.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot in our own hands that we can do with research.
Absolutely.
And, it goes back to what we were talking about before we came on the podcast, is that the narrative medicine, that what's my story coming to you,
I just love the idea of this narrative medicine.
Talk to me more about that.
So I suppose it was pre-COVID anyways. It was probably about 2017, 2018. So I'm obviously a nutritional therapist, and every year we have to do CPD, so continue professional development. And an area that I'm obviously interested in is female health, and a lot of hormone health, menopause, PMS, fertility, all of those topics and thyroid health as well, because again, that hormone imbalance is big, unfortunately, amongst women of all ages. And one of my CPDs that I chose to do was with a herbalist in the UK. And he had talked about this idea. He presented it as this idea of narrative medicine. I said, gosh, I don't know anything about that. I don't know what it's about. And the minute he started talking, so many pennies started to drop. When I sit there with the client, in a consultation with me, you might have an hour to an hour and a half in an initial consultation, depending on what the presenting concerns are. That's a lot of time to hear somebody's story. What were they presenting with? What is the biggest concern? What are they worried about? What avenues have they already pursued? Do they have an inkling or an idea that something, or did they have an inkling or idea that something was wrong? How do they go about investigating that? And then I'll put all of those dots together. It's kind of like a functional medicine timeline, we call it. What was the trigger? What's mediating it? How is it presenting now? What avenues have you pursued? What have you been given a diagnosis, for example? And if you have, how long has it taken for you to get that, right? That's a lot. That's a lot of trauma for people to carry around. And in a GP's practice, you might get, and this isn't any, shadow or shade on the GPs, but they just don't have the time. It's 5 to 7 minutes, And the trauma that often a lot of us carry around with us, with our history of health, can be a lot. And just have somebody to listen to it, take all the details, put it down on paper or in a timeline for them, track it for them so that they can see this is how one step led to the other, and that's why it's presenting like this now. What can we do? What control can we take back from our daily food and lifestyle choices that can help you feel better in your day-to-day, might even help reduce any of the symptoms that you have, or might work on getting you back along that spectrum towards wellness, away from sickness. And that is really empowering for people.
Absolutely.
No, that's really amazing. Empowering.
Yeah.
Like we're sitting here now telling stories. Stories are our lifeblood.
Yeah.
I love listening to podcasts where people tell a story. And if they tell a story about an illness, and you were telling me your story in our very first conversation, and what has led you to this. These stories empower other people. And we want to know them because we want to see or pick out the seeds that resonate with us and reflect in our life, in our story. And wonder, okay, well, what did they do? Can I follow that same path? I just think I'm 10 years now in practice, and thankfully most of my beautiful clients are women, and we love to talk, right? The beauty of that is you get to hear a lot of their story, and you get to acknowledge it, you get to witness it, and you get to say to them, that was really hard. I'm glad that you're still here to tell me that story, right? But how many times, I cannot tell you how many times in clinic, they've said, I knew something was wrong, I just didn't know what to do about it. Or I went to my GP and I followed up with the consultant and they said, no, your bloods are fine, or this is all okay, but you're still not feeling right. Like, that's not, you are the ultimate authority on your body. You will know when something is not right, when it doesn't feel good. And the worst thing is to be told, you're fine. It's in your head. Your blood's saying you're within normal ranges. Nothing on this looks odd to me. Everything seems fine. Then you go away thinking, oh my gosh, is my intuition completely wrong? I know I'm not feeling myself. I know I'm not right, but nobody's listening to my story.
So right? You're talking about a partnership, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the therapist, the doctor, whoever
you go to, and whoever can help guide you on your journey to achieve your health and wellness, or to get you back to what feels more like yourself. So whether that's a mental health journey, or whether that's a post-cancer journey, whether it's you've just been diagnosed with something and now you're kind of searching for the tools to help you navigate it and find your day-to-day kind of flow. Like, what can I do every day that's going to actively benefit me, and not allow this diagnosis, this illness, or this condition to deplete you further and further. So whoever it is, whether it's talk therapy, whether it's a type of aromatherapy, whether it's reflexology, an Ayurvedic practitioner, a nutritional therapist, a GP, a consultant, an oncologist, whoever that person is, it should be a collaborative process. You should be able to work with them, tell them your story, because you know your body better than anybody else. You know what's working for you and what's not. Okay. And they may put you on medication and say, this should sort you out. And you're like, no, it's not doing that for me. Or this is what the research says. We do this, this, and this, and that will alleviate it. And you're sitting there thinking, we've done all those things and I still don't feel right. You should be able to advocate, but it's very hard to do so.
Yeah. Yeah,
like in an environment like that where you're already feeling vulnerable,
yeah.
You're the sick person in that picture. You're the patient, okay? Yeah. Then we wear the patient hat and we feel like we outsource then the decision making to the professional.
Yeah.
But really, it's more of a collaborative process.
So the patient becomes the colleague.
Yeah, like
That's
you are the source of information for me. You are you're the biggest authority. You know your body inside out. You know what feels right. I should be using you as a source of information to help guide how my recommendations will then work within your day to day. So for example, like I'll have clients come to me and be like, now, this is it, I have X, Y, and Z. Now you're going to be able to tell me what to do. And I'm like, oh gosh, I wish I had all the answers. I'm glad that you come here thinking that I have all the answers, Julie. But I don't. I just kind of draw the information out of you because you know what works well for you. I can tell you, the research says, the science says, according to functional medicine or integrative medicine, you should do X, Y, and Z. But if you know that that doesn't sit well with you, that doesn't suit you, that's not going to be something that you're going to adopt, then I need to find a way to make that work within your boundaries, within your framework, I suppose, of your day-to-day life, what your interests are, and what your food tastes and food choices are. Now, I can encourage some choices over others, but really it's a collaborative project, and it's something that you want to work with your client on with. And so you use their story to guide you and to give you the information that you need in order to move forward.
So it's striking me, it's coming back to what we started with about moving away from our food sources, that we've moved away from ourselves.
A little bit.
So it's kind of connecting back with ourselves, our story. That brings back the connection with the food and food sources.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, it's the idea, I suppose, that you kind of have to listen to the whispers before your body starts to shout. But if you've never listened to the whispers before, if you've kind of ignored your intuition, if you've said, oh, that's fine, that's just the way I am, but actually this niggle, this aches and pain, this soreness, this feeling like this isn't my norm, but it's become the norm, or you are starting to feel like you're not yourself. You can't really put your finger on it, but you know that maybe your breathing is a little bit more laboured, or there's a lump somewhere that wasn't there before, or there's a stiffness or a soreness that wasn't there before, or there's this feeling of lethargy and fatigue that you never really experienced before, or that you're struggling to do what you would perceive to be your normal day, or your daily activities, your normal daily activities, and they're taking a lot more out of you. Those things where you're starting to listen to the whisper before it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger until a point where now you're at a diagnosed state. Now you have a condition or a syndrome, or there's a tumour, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we don't check in, if we don't listen to our bodies are just inherently wise. We came onto this planet knowing more than we do now, probably years and years later. It's like we try to undo all the knowledge that we have. We try not listen to the knowledge that we come in with, you know?
So it's going back to, we mentioned before we come on the podcast, the wise traditions of past generations, but the wisdom in our bodies, the wisdom connecting in with the wisdom that we have.
Yeah. So, did you know that your grandmother carried you in her womb?
No.
Yeah. So as a woman, your grandmother carried you. Then your mother, because she had your mum, and inside that your ovaries were already produced. Her ovaries were already produced, and her ovums, her eggs, and you were one of them. And now you're here. So we've been carried by traditions for years. But if we stop listening to them and we start diverting away from the traditional ways of living, a more traditional way of eating, and moving away from our traditional diets, something simple as looking more towards that standard Western diet, that standard American diet, which is maybe higher in fats, trans fats in particular, higher in salts, lower in nutritive value, higher in sugar, a lot more colorings, preservatives, all of those things, that processed food, and we start to select those more regularly. And we move away from what would have been more of a traditional diet here in Ireland, root vegetables, your potatoes, your parsnips, your carrots, your cabbages, your Brussels sprouts, your cauliflowers, your broccolis, right? We didn't really have that many grains for generations, right? The Romans never came here with wheat, okay? So generationally, our genes are generations behind, okay? Because we're not like the Europeans who had exposure to wheat for generations and generations. And we can see that. And how we see that is that we have the highest prevalence of celiac and non-celiac gluten sensitivity in all of Western Europe and Ireland.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it's an autoimmune condition.
Okay.
So our immune system identifies gluten as being a pathogen.
Wow.
And we start to attack it.
That makes a huge amount of sense.
So we didn't have those. So if we move away, now look around, everything is wheat.
Yeah.
Everything has gluten in it.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But generationally or genetically, we're not able to keep up with that.
Yeah.
So the easiest way to kind of up-regulate your biological software, to keep up with the constantly changing environment around us, is through the foods that you consume. And if we get back to the basics, it's your root vegetables, staying hydrated, good quality proteins, healthy fats. Don't be afraid of the fats, nuts and seeds and olive oils and flax oils and avocados and fish and good quality eggs, or omega-3 rich eggs or organic eggs. All of those fats are hugely beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, this podcast is simply holistic living.
Yeah.
And I think everything you're talking about, there's a lot of simplicity.
Yeah, it's stripping it back, isn't it?
It's really stripping it back,
Michael Pollan, he's a US journalist and author, and he's written a number of different books, but he's written one book, it's very simple, it's just called Food Rules. But his kind of, I suppose the way he sums it all up is, if your grandmother was to walk through a supermarket store right now and walk up and down through the shelves, only eat the foods that she would actually identify as food. So if you think generationally from now, in 2 generations, the food that we are now looking at on our shelves is so very different to how its natural state of food would have been originally. So if we can kind of strip that back and move it back to the more basic, so a natural yogurt instead of a yogurt with a flavour that has added sugar, if you can.
Yeah.
Right? Organic where possible. All right. Good quality meats sourced locally if you can. There's a big movement in Canada at the minute, all around Toronto, and it's called 100-mile radius. They're only trying to source food within 100 miles of Toronto City.
Fantastic.
That will show you what people are trying to invest in, keeping the basics and the quality. That's what we really want, because if it's becoming the building blocks of your muscles, your heart, your vasculature, your brain cells, your cognitive function, you want to make sure that it's really good quality building blocks.
So it's food is medicine. That's what we're talking
exactly
about. And we're our own physicians.
If we can, yeah.
If we can. Working collaboratively with somebody like yourself.
Yeah, reach out to people if you feel like you need help or guidance.
Yeah.
But make sure that you're part of that process and that you're not just following somebody else's instructions.
Yeah. There's some very simple things to finish up with, really. That, we have stripped it back, and I'm so passionate about that, because I went through my own health issues.
Absolutely.
And, and that was part of that process of really working collaboratively with the physician that I found that was able to help me.
Fantastic.
So, thank you so much.
Oh, Julie, thank you.
Everything. I'm sure we're going to talk again, because there's so much in it. For anybody listening, I think there's a couple of very simple things that they can just even change one thing.
Yeah.
Look for organic in the supermarket.
Yeah.
And less packaging.
Less packaging, more peeling, less packaging. That's what I say.
That's a great note to end with, Claire. More peeling, less packaging. Let's finish up on that note. Fantastic. And thank you again so much.
You're so welcome.
Well, I loved how Claire was able to pare everything back for us to make things more accessible, so that we can start to make those changes that she spoke about. Claire really emphasised in this chat the importance of making small, consistent changes, choosing organic vegetables where we can in the supermarket, getting really good quality meats from our butcher or our local supermarket, meats that are Irish. For women particularly, prioritising dark green vegetables, staying hydrated, and listening to our own bodies, tuning into our bodies. I loved what Claire was talking about in the very end, where she finished up by saying less packaging and more peeling. That really resonated with me, and it's something that we can remember. And finally, Claire's example that if our grandmother was walking down the supermarket today, what would she recognise as food? That's a very, very simple way that really struck a chord with me as well. But again, it's just that one change, those one or two changes, that's what I loved. I'll certainly be going down my supermarket I'm thinking of my grandmother and what would she recognise as food, and really keeping an eye out for that organic veg. I'm definitely open to have Clare back on the podcast again. There was so much wisdom in what Clare had to say.